Well, here we are. It's finally Cyberpunk 2077 release week, and we had our first initial wave of reviews go out this morning. And I wanted to talk about them a bit because there were some interesting things in some of these reviews, and it does bring up the question as to like day one patches and glitches in the game and all of this, and some interesting stipulations that were placed on these reviews here for Cyberpunk 2077. But I will say, after going through these reviews, I'm very excited to play this game because, for the most part, from some people I've talked to who have been playing it and just looking at some of these different reviews that have been posted, the game is really good. Like, it's great even. So I'm excited to get my hands on it later this week and check it out for myself. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure to hit the like button down below. Helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Small Wave Plus channel, make sure you subscribe down below. Let's go over here to Metacritic, where we can see, based on 43 critic reviews, it's currently sitting at a 91. This is on PC specifically, by the way. It appears, from what I've heard, that console codes are going out today to different places, publications, reviewers on YouTube, and all of this stuff. So we'll have another embargo, I believe, lift later this week that will go over the console versions for like the PlayStation 4, which will also be played on the PS5, Series X, S, all of that. But right now, we're looking at a 91 score. It went down to 90, then went back up to 91, so it might just be like almost right in the middle, and it could change, but I do see at least the PC version probably sticking in the low 90s overall, which for me, I look at that and I say, yeah, it's probably a game worth picking up and playing. But Cyberpunk is a bit different for a lot of people. There's this mystique almost around it, and I think a lot of that has to do with, one, it's CD Projekt Red. They did The Witcher 3 and people love that game, so naturally there is a high bar that's set for them, and a lot of people expect them to meet that high bar. But there are some things in Cyberpunk 2077 that seem to be sticking out in like every single review. And that has to do with the overall glitches and bugs in this game. Because I look at 91 and I say, yeah, that's a great score. Like, any game that comes out and it's in the 90s, I mean, it's a must-play then, right? That's what Metacritic will put a little badge on it that's like must-play game. Yeah, that makes sense to me. Great score. But if we go down here, a lot of places point out how good the world is and how interesting it is to kind of explore and do side quests and all of this. But every one of these reviews that I've read through does point out a fairly large amount of bugs. Let me give you an example here. Even for a perfect score from like Windows Central, they say Cyberpunk 2077 is a celebration of the entire medium, marrying cutting-edge technical innovation, unrestrained user agency, and an authentic and immersive experience that transports you to another universe. No game has executed on the promise of gaming like Cyberpunk 2077. CD Projekt Red's artistic achievement cannot be overstated. Despite an impressive array of bugs and glitches, Cyberpunk 2077 remains an experience without peer. So the bugs and glitches are like next level, it appears, because they are actually impressive. VGC, an immersive and stunningly crafted RPG, which has raised the bar for cinematic quality in open world games. Just be aware of the bug issues at release. Game Spew, if you want your experience in Night City to be as polished as possible, perhaps hold back until a patch or two has landed to iron out some kinks, but you'll definitely want to visit soon. Phenomenal. That's what Cyberpunk 2077 is. And then we have GameSpot, who was less forgiving, I would say, about the bugs. It kind of sounds like they had a rougher time, possibly with the game crashing while they were trying to do different things. But they say, your mileage may vary, but in our experience, the bugs are obtrusive and substantial across the board, often forcing us to reload saves or exit the game entirely. It's hard to get really into a world you constantly have to leave. And then they go on further to say, yeah, the game itself, when you are playing it and everything's working, is phenomenal. Like, one of the best games we've played this year, probably this generation. It seems that what they've done here is created a game that was overly ambitious, as we all expected, because they kept delaying it and talking about how they're getting a patch together for day one and all of this. We heard about crunch that they weren't going to do, and then they had to do it, and it's been all over the board. So it does sound like, because according to these reviews, the main campaign itself, the story, isn't terribly long for a game like this. We would expect, I've seen people say, oh, maybe the story will be like 40, 50 hours long. It sounds like the story's 20 to 25 hours long, but the side quests themselves that you will find yourself in at times if you seek them out, end up being like competing with the main story itself in terms of quality and storytelling and all of this. So it seems like a game that, as I expected and many of you, is an open world style where you basically create your own story and the paths you want to take. And that brings up an interesting question here when it comes to Cyberpunk 2077 specifically. I think a game can still be really fun if it's buggy and glitchy. Example, Fallout. A lot of us like Fallout. Skyrim. A lot of us like Skyrim. Those games are buggy. Like the Elder Scrolls games are, the Fallout games are, but a lot of time it's like funny. It's like this janky game, but it's really funny the way it is. It seems like Cyberpunk kind of fits into that a bit, where people are willing to overlook the bugs and the glitches, even if they're this plentiful, where every review seems to mention them, because the core game itself is that good. But then it brings into question, should a game that appears to be that glitchy get a perfect score? Should it get a 10 out of 10? Should it get 100 out of 100? If it is that obvious? And for me, I would say probably not. No, because what you then do is you assume a lot of these bugs and glitches are fixable in a patch down the road. And it sounds like, according to some people who have played this, I saw SkillUp mention it, I saw Gene mention it, the game is borderline like a glitchy mess, and they don't even believe that like 1 or even 2 patches will fix it. It just appears the world itself continued to grow in development, and they got to a point where it was even too ambitious for them to finish up and polish completely. Which means that the stipulations around these reviews make a lot more sense, because what happened here is that they weren't letting reviewers use footage that they captured. They were providing B-roll to reviewers to use in their videos or on the website that they were doing written reviews for, that they could kind of overlay and show the game off. And that is interesting, because it does sound like they're like, hey, you might have seen some glitches. We don't want you to really show that right now. And every one of these talked about it. So they would obviously show examples of what they are mentioning here. And people are thinking, okay, maybe that means that there is a day 1 patch that would correct a lot of those glitches. And that's why they don't want people to show it. But I mean, the reviewers can only talk about what's been placed in front of them. That's the biggest thing here. You can't really have reviewers look at this and say, oh, I'm sure a day 1 patch is going to come out, right? Like, we don't have to worry about these glitches, because that's what they are experiencing, and their job is to write up or talk about what they're experiencing. Now, I do think that this game will probably be fixed eventually when it comes to a lot of those glitches. Like, it could be several patches. It could be months and months after release, but we could get to that point and we look back on Cyberpunk and we say, wow, this game, it's like one of the best games ever made, right? At that time, if a lot of the glitches and the bugs are ironed out. Now, there's also a chance that they never get ironed out, like that they are just so ingrained in the game itself that they're just always present. It's just, okay, yeah, it's Cyberpunk, you know, yeah, that person's walking across this room in the air right now, good old Cyberpunk, but the story's great and the world is interesting and fun to go through, so it's all right. Now, you might be wondering, why are there no console versions being talked about here? It's just PC. Well, it appears that the embargo initially set here was just for the PC version, with B-roll that was provided from CD Projekt Red, and codes for consoles are going out starting today, it appears, to different outlets, YouTubers, publications, all of these different places, and we should find out more about that closer to release, maybe the day before, I guess, because remember, CD Projekt Red said after like Wednesday, like early in the morning, like 3 a.m. Pacific, then you guys can start talking about all these different Cyberpunk 2077 moments that you're coming across in your games that you got early. Yeah, and most likely the game that you would get early, because it wouldn't necessarily just be a code, it would be on disc, it's for the console version. So I would expect the embargo to lift basically when they said people can start sharing stuff early Wednesday morning. But I am excited to check out Cyberpunk 2077. I just gotta wait until Thursday to check it out. It's going to be a bit of a long wait because I still have a couple of days, but I'm actually not as down on the number of glitches and all this stuff, because I was actually more concerned that the game itself would not impress or live up to the hype. And while it still has not necessarily lived up to that hype for everyone, from what I'm reading here, it's pretty good. And that's good to hear. There was part of me that was worried it was going to come out and it was going to be like a low 80s, high 70s. And I'm like, well, that's it. It's another Anthem. No, Cyberpunk 2077, based on these reviews, is very, very good, even great. So looking forward to it later on this week. But I want to hear from you guys down in the comments. When it comes to this situation, if you were someone reviewing this game and they hand you the game and they're like, check this out, all right? You have an embargo set for here. You could put all of your info out there. Then with this B-roll, you can tell us what you think about it. And there's all these glitches and bugs. Would you overlook them if it was game breaking, like we heard GameSpot say, where they had to keep quitting out of the game? And would you say, well, I'm sure a day one patch is coming, I won't worry, or mark this down for that? Or would you, because it's damaging your experience? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.